Well, this is just past 3 o'clock, according to my watch. So welcome you all to City University of Hong Kong, to the book launch seminar on for our book, Hong Kong Professional Services and the Belt and Road Initiative, envisaging sustainability policy development. So that is the title of our seminar. Because we wish to, not only to talk about our book, but also to leverage on the book publication to talk about the future, okay? So this is not only about academic achievement, that is the publication of book, one more book on the library, and one more book on our reading list for our students, okay? Although this should be important as well, but we hope that our book will have some meaningful impact for our forthcoming future of Hong Kong and beyond. And so with that, please, join me in welcoming Professor Chi Chan, our acting provost. He would like to give us a brief welcoming address and to welcome everybody. Professor Chan.
Okay. Good afternoon, Professor James Tsang, Professor Linda Lee, Mr. William Zhang, distinguished guests, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. And I'm pleased to deliver a welcoming speech for this joyful occasion, launching the book, Hong Kong Professional Services and the Belt and Road Initiative, Challenges for Co-evolving Sustainability, followed by a panel discussion. Now, the book is co-edited by Professor Linda Lee and Professor Felix Mo, Director and Co-Director of the Research Center for Sustainable Hong Kong, CSHK, an applied strategic development center established at the City University of Hong Kong in October 2017, which is about 4.5 years ago. Now, at that time, Mr. Paul Chen Mau Bo, Financial Secretary of Hong Kong SAR, and then the City University Council Chair, Mr. Herman Hu, and President Wei Ko, officiated the center's inauguration ceremony. CSHK aims to analyze and develop solutions that meet critical sustainability issues in Hong Kong from a multidisciplinary perspective, including policy, social sciences, and humanities, law, business studies, engineering, etc. Now, the center also houses the CSHK International Hub for the Belt and Road and supports related research and collaborative activities with stakeholders from different sectors and regions. I commend the foresight of the center directors in the timely establishments of the research center and the international hub for the Belt and Road when Hong Kong was doing business as usual, mainly focusing on servicing industry. And the Belt and Road Initiative was just gaining momentum. Through years of hard work, conducting research, organizing conferences, seminars and talks, and other knowledge transfer and educational events, some of the findings are now summarized in this new book. The book's first part focuses on addressing the question of how the Belt and Road Initiative matters to Hong Kong, and how Hong Kong's unique institutions and talents may make a difference. The second half of the book contemplates the potential opportunities from the perspectives of the recipient countries like Sri Lanka, Vietnam, Cambodia, and Myanmar. Now, in 5 years' time, the gross domestic product, GDP, of the 10 countries in the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, ASEAN, grew from 2,852 billion US dollar to 3,619 billion US from 2017 to 2022, representing an increase of close to 27%. Now, Cambodia and Vietnam registered a GDP growth of 27.6 and 49.4%, respectively, while Myanmar was minus 2.8%. Similarly, Sri Lanka also had its GDP reduced by 22% from 94.5 to 73.7 billion US during the same period. So, what will the causes for such remarkable economic development for some countries and not others? Will government policies, geopolitical stabilities, etc., affecting the foreign direct investment? Or despite the COVID-19 pandemic, why do the GDPs of Cambodia and Vietnam continue to grow handsomely? You may be able to get the clues from this book or the panel discussions which will begin shortly. Now, writing and editing this comprehensive book is a daunting task. I congratulate Professor Lee and Professor Mo and all the contributors of the book on launching it as an essential contribution to the World series on the Belt and Road Initiative. I would also like to thank the panelists to take part in the panel discussions and the audience for joining this event in person or online. And I wish you all a good afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Chen. Well, for such a nice and encouraging, welcoming address, in particular to our team. I think, you know, on top of what Professor Chen said, I would like, on behalf of Professor Phyllis Mo, because she's not feeling too well today, so that's why she cannot join us, despite early arrangements, to thank every single one of our contributors of the book. As you all know, from the book titles, okay, there are a total of 23 co-contributors in the book. And so every one of us are equally important, though in different ways. Then some of them are here joining us today. Not all of them, because some of them are out of town, okay? And some of them, like Professor Phyllis Mo, regrettably cannot join us. But for those who are here, can I invite you to stand up and we have applause to them, please? Thank you, thank you. So now it's my time to give a very brief introduction of the book. I would be very, very brief because, as you know, okay, having worked on this project for at least since 2016, and writing of the book report, I mean the report of the project as the manuscript took us actually 2 years, not to say the production time, okay? Just the drafting and the initial revision took us 2 years. So it could take me hours and hours to go through the book, but I'm going to take not more than 15 minutes. I might want to speak less because now today the jewel is in the panel, okay? So and in your participation. But before we go to that, hopefully, you know, a brief introduction would set the background a little bit. So our authors, okay, I already talked about our 23 authors, and what characterizes them, well, a lot of things, but I think most important thing is that we come from a good number of different disciplines. So we are, obviously I'm from political science, okay, so I have to say political science, okay, public policy, that includes international relations a bit, okay, and you know, applied ethics, we have colleagues from applied ethics, and accountancy, obviously, all right, and economics and finance. Otherwise, how can we work on the chapters on the financial side? And of course, the law, okay? So we have Peter here. And of course, in our team, we have historians, right? So, you know, those are some of the disciplines that come to my mind. And of course, there's always sub-disciplines that are everywhere, here and there, right? So this is an interdisciplinary team. And you can see from the visual recognition that many of us are pretty young, okay, are pretty young. And that is important because I think, you know, the book, it's something about the future, right? Of course, we are seeing what Hong Kong can do, and what Hong Kong is, comes from what Hong Kong has done in the past. But the vision, it's forward-looking. So, and then in working in this kind of project, it's important to get involved our younger generations. So, to the best of our effort, okay, to the best of our effort, we have engaged and try to engage with our younger generations of scholars, and here they are. And actually, beyond these 23 contributors, there is a longer list, right? So some of the names appear in the preface of the book, okay, in which we acknowledge their contributions. And also, of course, some of the names we have to omit because of sensitivities and the need to be confidential, okay? So, but I think that is a very important thing to bear in mind. This is a in very true sense, this is a collaborative project. This is a teamwork. Moreover, the collaboration goes beyond, I would say this more closely knit clusters of researchers and authors. We actually work with, you know, a large number of people, you know, in the community, in the various policy network, in the business, because the nature of the work requires us to, right? The nature of the work requires us to talk to a lot of people to get the insights. And as we wrote in the book on methodology, well, which is relatively brief, I apologize for that, okay? Because there's so many things to write. So this book, if you use a very strict perspective of requirement of academic piece of work, you may think, oh my goodness, you know, the methodology is a little bit brief, okay, the section is too brief, and the theory is thin, right? Why don't you elaborate on this theory and that theory and that theory and that theory, right? So we try to be brief on those things because the book, it's catered for a broader audience, okay? So for those colleagues or readers, I would like to hear more about about methodology and theories, you know, we welcome them to join our other seminars, okay? So that's it. What I mean is, beyond the authors, the tier group, we work with a variety of people, and for that, you know, Professor Chen also mentioned in his welcoming address, the center at the first, before before the center was established, we already established a sustainable Hong Kong research hub, right? So which continues to exist as a virtual platform of collaborative or for collaboration. it is, I think the purpose is, you may say it is symbolic, because we haven't organized a lot of activities. We haven't got meetings, okay? For instance, we haven't got executive meetings, all right? We don't elect office bearers, all right? So we don't charge membership fees, for instance, okay? So this is something like symbolic. But at the same time, I think the symbolic value is important because it signals a relationship between the research team and the hub members. We see one another as partners, as working together. And in fact, you know, we welcome our members in the hub to join our research activities as they see fit. Okay, so it is an open door policy. Like now, we open the door, right? And even though we would like to have registration so that we can facilitate our planning, but actually people can come in if they want. So so the hub, you know, it's here to signals our action research and also our collaborative methods of, our approach to the community to which you know, we learn the insights. Right. So yeah, so actually I covered my methods a lot already. So we use action research, okay? Because action research is not only about engaging and partnering, but also in the process of getting to learn the situation and process, we are actually already producing impact. We are already producing impact because through our discussion with our various stakeholders, that is what we notice. Okay, they are interested in our feedback. They're interested in our ideas about how things could be done. And of course, in the course, we learn from them as well. So it is a kind of interactive process. And of course, you know, we have done a lot of interviews and field work. And of course, the more traditional ways is archival and documentary research. Okay, this is everything. Everybody needs to do that, right? I need not go into that in detail. And what is our finding in a nutshell? Our findings, as Professor Chen mentioned, okay, the first part of our book, we covered a number of things. The first important thing we cover is actually our analysis on the vision and the objective of the Belt and Road Initiative. So our major findings finds that you know, there is actually because we know the vision, okay, from the official documents, all right. The Chinese government detailed the vision in various occasions. And then they undertook very massive infrastructure projects in a very large number of countries. But at the same time, these projects have attracted a lot of controversies in the international arena. And so our discussion finds that, you know, so this is actually, there is a lot of discordance between the visions and practices, and the projects actually you know, brought quite a good number of sustainability risks, and that cannot be ignored, okay, despite the emphasis of a lot of forthcoming and forward-looking vision by the Chinese authorities. And so we find that, so why is that, right? So the challenge actually is how to translate the grand vision into a program of actions which can be done, okay? That is, you know, it's very good to have a very grand visions, but it's another thing to translate it, to make it really workable, really feasible. So I think this is actually the major challenge. And a lot of issues, you know, more specifically would be confusions about what this is all about, okay? There's a lot of confusion, and the confusion is not limited to international actors, because we may say that international actors, well, you may not know, right? You may not understand, right? But the confusion actually existed to some extent within the domestic circles, okay? Within the domestic, the variety of actors within China. So I think that is significant. And of course, that includes Hong Kong, right? That includes Hong Kong. When Hong Kong was proposed to play a major role, and in fact, a unique role, this is official language, right? Hong Kong need to play a major and also unique role. It is not very clear what kind of role it actually is, right? What kind of role and how unique, and how can we in Hong Kong, okay, men and women, young and old, what can we do, right? And what we can do more or do less, right, in order to contribute to the Belt and Road Initiative. So I think this is a lot of this lack of clarity. So on the one hand, we know that Hong Kong institutions and talents, right, have a lot of strength. There's a lot of official discourse about praising Hong Kong's institutions and praising the availability of a lot of professional talents in Hong Kong. And in particular, Hong Kong as an international hub in the financial, legal, arbitration, maritime services, education, and in more recent years, an emphasis on innovation and technology as well. And so, well, in the early years, there's a lot of emphasis on the role of a super connector. Of course, the super connector is still our official role, right? Because this is Hong Kong's, as an international city, you know, our traditional strengths are relative to the hinterland in mainland China. But the question is, how are we going to go beyond this role as a super connector, and how to leverage on our institutional strength and our talent? So I think, and then there is this new policy about the Greater Bay Area, and we have Whitford Hong here. Okay, he is one of the experts talking about, you know, and working on Greater Bay Area. So what is this Greater Bay Area? This very important national initiative and strategy is, and how Hong Kong can really contribute to this, and how is it related to the Belt and Road Initiative? So in the book, we have some discussion, okay, and in fact, our team did make a submission to the central government on what and how the Greater Bay Area concept can work better. And in a nutshell, we propose that the Greater Bay Area should not be seen as a kind of a program to promote development of a geographical space, right? Obviously, Greater Bay Area is a piece of land, right, consisting of 11 cities. So it's easy to see that Greater Bay Area policies is about how to promote the economic development or even the social or whatever development of these 11 cities and the people living in it. And our project and our team propose that no, of course it is about it, but the key is not about this, all right? So the key is actually about how Hong Kong, as part of the Greater Bay Area, okay, Hong Kong is part of it, a very important part of it. How can Hong Kong help the rest of Greater Bay Area to foster and deepen innovations and reform? And from there, Greater Bay Area, as in the case of early 1980s, Guangdong going one step ahead of the rest of the country, Greater Bay Area will be going one step or maybe two steps ahead of the country. And so how the rest of the country can leverage on that and promote, deepen the program of reform and innovation. So let us not forget when the current administration of, the current central leadership comes to position, 10 years ago, they put forward a comprehensive program of comprehensively deepening reform, right? And so that is the agenda. That's still the agenda, but the key is how, and where, right? So I think this is the Greater Bay Area as a national policy. It's also promoted by the central government, the same central leadership, right? So our research team proposed that this is actually the key to it. And so briefly, before we go to the panel, so the book, the part one, are part talking about the vision of Belt and Road Initiative and the role of Hong Kong. And we have 3 chapters on focusing on a number of professional services. And then we have 4 chapters focusing on a number of overseas jurisdictions. So we have been to quite a number of these places, okay, jurisdictions. Other than the, actually, this is only a sample of the major places we've been to. And then we gather the feedback of the recipient countries. And so this book would not be only about one-sided story from the perspective of Hong Kong or China, but we try to also get the message and get the insights from the recipient countries to talk about what does the Belt and Road Initiative mean to them and what Hong Kong might do and might do more or might do better. And to not for the Belt and Road Initiative per se, but for the well-being of these countries and the people. So with that, we see the common needs of the various places is capacity building, transparency, and communication. Okay, they see the common needs, how to get the Belt and Road up and running better, and then they talk a lot about how what and Hong Kong and its professional services can help to in these areas. So I should stop talking. And now is the time for the panel discussion. So may I invite the panel, this distinguished panels. And today we have Mr. William Zhang from the CEPU, the Chief Executive Policy Unit, joining me as the co-moderator of the panel, please, William. And we have 2 contributors from the book, okay, Peter and Linda Jia joining us. And we have 2 veteran experts in the financial field and also the management and architectural field. Jerry Zhang, yes. So Nicholas Ho will be joining us online, okay, because his flight is delayed, okay. He should be here today, but his flight is delayed, so he won't be here until tomorrow, okay. So he will be joining us online in a bit. Okay. So. Hi, Nicholas. I see you here.
Hi. Hello, Professor. Hello. Hi, everyone. Sorry, I'm not there today.
It's okay. You look good, right? So we can start, William.
Thank you very much, Professor Lee, for the introduction of this very timely research. But before we actually start the panel discussion, may I take the time here to briefly introduce a little bit about the Chief Executive's Policy Unit, CEPU for short. This research was, the government was grateful to have supported through the Strategic Public Policy Research Funding Scheme, and this funding scheme is administered by the CEPU. The CEPU was established in December 28th last year, and we specialize in the research and advocacy on long-term and strategic issues for Hong Kong. It is part of our mandate to build up external research capacity in Hong Kong, and to administer the 2 public research funding schemes is the key means to achieve that goal. Specifically, this research was supported by the Strategic Public Policy Research Funding Scheme, and it aims to support longer-term public policy research and on strategic themes and research areas identified by the Hong Kong HKSAR government, which of course, the Belt and Road Initiative is one of such key strategic themes and areas, and to facilitate collaboration among academic institutions and think tanks, which is manifested in this Belt and Road research of Professor Lee and Professor Mo, as well as this seminar today. We will continue to fund and support important research projects like this, and which would inform policymaking process, drive changes, so that we can keep up with national development and international trends and contribute to the long-term policymaking of Hong Kong. I would, of course, like to first congratulate Professor Lee and Professor Mo for launching this very significant book. The research outcomes offer valuable insights to Hong Kong's unparalleled and unique role in supporting the Belt and Road Initiative, using what Professor Lee has framed in her presentation, the sustainable and inclusive development of investment. And while the government is striving to best promote and support Hong Kong's professional services, particularly in how to serve the Belt and Road Initiative better, this Belt and Road Initiative is, after all, a monumental project that needs on-the-ground learning. We are grateful that different stakeholders in the society, from academia to business sector, are joining hands to have taken many thoughtful initiatives to further understand the Belt and Road context and to conduct further analysis. Finally, I would like to steal a little bit of time here to do an advertisement, and that is until early June, we are currently accepting new applications for the Strategic Public Policy Research Funding Scheme. So I know because a lot of academic institutions are here today, so to the members of the higher education and research community, you're encouraged to refer to our website and submit your application to the funding scheme. Once again, I would like to thank Professor Lee and her team for organizing today's seminar to celebrate this multi-year hard work. I look forward to the fruitful discussion later on, and I'm excited to learn more about this, especially in how to help Hong Kong to thrive as an international hub of professional services. So without further ado, I would like to start the panel discussion by referring to Professor Chen first, because as Professor Lee has mentioned at her presentation, that the legal service is a very important sector in the Belt and Road Initiative. And she also specifically mentioned that the Greater Bay Area is actually a very important, well, I should not say a stepping stone, but at least a testing ground for all such professional services reforms and initiatives. So maybe, if I may, I would like to invite Professor Chen to talk, elaborate more on, how in this area, especially how the Greater Bay Area, what role does it play as far as the legal services in Belt and Road Initiative is?
Very much, Chair. I think the important thing to remember is, Hong Kong is the only common law jurisdiction in China. So that's a big plus, right? We need to remember that. And actually, in the past decade or so, I have experienced how quickly things are going in the Greater Bay Area. One of the things that happened, as a personal experience, was quite amazing, is I was invited to be an adjudicator in the Qianhai. That's a city, that's a town in Shenzhen, cooperation area in Shenzhen, to be an adjudicator there to help the courts to decide cases. So a lot of these cases actually involve Hong Kong parties, and they will apply to the court to ask for a Hong Kong adjudicator. So I was an adjudicator there for 5 years. And my experience is that it's extremely interesting. First of all, as a Hong Kong party, you want someone who is a Hong Konger on the panel, right? And it's just very, I think it gives them a lot of confidence, to have that person sitting on the panel. So that's one experience. Another experience is for the past 10 years or so, I've joined CityU for more than 10 years. I've been involved in a program that is there's cooperation between the Supreme People's Court and the City University of Hong Kong School of Law, whereby Chinese judges, they come to CityU to study for LLM as well as doctorate degree. And as a result, there is a lot of dialogue and exchange between Chinese judges and Hong Kong legal academia. And of course, we take them to the courts. We go, they visit ICAC, you know, all the usual places that people will go to in the legal field when they visit Hong Kong. And I think this program has proven to be extremely helpful because a lot of these judges are actually senior judges. So I have probably now about 10 students, PhD students, JST students, who are senior judges. And a lot of them are actually court presidents in China. So they actually know a lot about what's going on in the mainland system. And of course, through studying in Hong Kong, they learn a lot about common law as well. So when they go back, they are spreading what they learned to other people. So that's one way, you know, you can see it as how Hong Kong legal system and legal profession can sort of influence how mainland China operates in its legal system. Arbitration is another very important aspect, I think. You know, arbitration in Hong Kong has always been thriving, and you know, despite rhetoric to the contrary, I think Hong Kong's rule of law is still very much intact. There is still a lot of confidence in our courts. And
thank you very much. This message needs to go out a lot, I think. I'm sorry.
Especially from you guys.
Yeah.
And the important thing I think to remember is Hong Kong arbitration. We always compete with Singapore, right? And some people say, oh, Singapore is better. They have some policies, I must admit, and especially representative from the government is here. Recently, I heard that Singapore has given permanent residency to a very well-known arbitrator. So day one, he lands in Singapore, he gets the permanent residency. So something to think about, right? So we need to be competitive, right? But Hong Kong is still very competitive. I think our HKIC is ranked 3rd in terms of its international arbitration institution in the world. Our HKIAC rules is ranked number 1, in terms of comprehensiveness as arbitration rules. My personal experience has been very positive as an adjudicator in the Tian High Court, and as something also to think about is third-party funding, and especially you guys are here. We have relaxed our third-party funding rules for arbitration a few years ago, and it is proven to be very, very effective in sort of lowering the bar for access to justice. Now, Singapore has changed their third-party funding rules and has given all international commercial cases, because a bit of background, if you fund someone's litigation, that's a criminal offense under Hong Kong common law. But that has been changed when it comes to arbitration in Hong Kong, and many years ago in Singapore. Now, in Singapore, they have also relaxed the rule for international commercial cases. I think that's the next step for Hong Kong. We have to do it, because access to justice, whether you are a citizen or your business, is simply too expensive. So we have to have these, on top of contingency fee, we now call it conditional fees, right? When people say contingency fee, all they can think about is the US contingency fee, and they get very scared about the whole thing. But there is actually a lot of midway solutions that we can lower the bar and lower and increase access to justice. In terms of the cooperation between Hong Kong and Greater Bay Area in particular, I think with the Greater Bay Area lawyer examination, I think there are 2 rounds already held. I think there will be more integration going forward, right? So I'll save my time for the discussion, but that's just an overview as to how things are going these days. And I think there is I think it's very, very optimistic when I look at the broader picture, not only in terms of Greater Bay Area. And Greater Bay Area is sort of the prelude to Hong Kong's involvement in BRI. So I think Hong Kong will be very successful, legal profession will be very successful in participating in GBA. And that would be a very important stepping stone going one step further in participating in BRI. Thank you.
Yeah, so let us go through the panelists first, and then we have some interactive discussion, all right? Okay. So Jerry worked in, for decades, are in the financial sector, right? And then have experience in the US and also in Hong Kong, and also in working with the state-owned sector as well. And so your insight. And Jerry also published a book on Belt and Road Initiative recently. So congratulations.
Thank you, Professor Lee. It's a great pleasure to be here. And I didn't realize you started the project in 2016. I'm a finance professional. I was a banker for 15 years and as a private investor for 12, 13 years. So, but I am a DBA graduate of CityU. In 2018, I went out on a trip together with Professor Linda Lee to Belarus, investigating China-Belarus Industrial Park, because I chose the Belt and Road Initiative as my dissertation topic. And as Professor Lee mentioned, I got lucky. I published my dissertation in 2021. The title is Chinese Business and the Belt and Road Initiative Institutional Strategies. I will share a little bit from my book about the financing role of Hong Kong. Professor Lee mentioned earlier that the transparency issues, the financial issues, and also you mentioned Hong Kong's role as a super connector and what's beyond. What I have been thinking over these years that should Hong Kong aim to play the role of a Belt and Road financing center and beyond? Or do we have the resources and the platforms available to do that? My personal view, yes, Hong Kong can do that. But we right now don't have all the stars aligned. And I just want to share a little bit probably about one case that I investigated and we actually talked about in the past. What I have observed is that going back to the book and also the various documents as we have covered, whether it's the vision published by NDRC in 2015 or the agreement signed between NDRC and the Hong Kong SAR government, or the Greater Bay Development Outline, or the 14th five-year plan. All of those key policy documents have, I would say, nominated Hong Kong as the financial center for Belt and Road Initiative. But it's only the type of a top-down policy course. And the Hong Kong government has done a lot of things. And William mentioned a little bit, and we probably all know that. And the government has earmarked some money, actually. Some of the funds I covered actually have received the money from Hong Kong M&A and other policy institutions to do the job. But the private sector has been lukewarm in terms of the investments. Why? The biggest thing that I have observed is that most of the Belt and Road financing, particularly from the central government and from the SOE policy institutions, have bypassed Hong Kong. How can we make Hong Kong as the Belt and Road financing center while most of the money have bypassed Hong Kong? That's something that I feel that we should voice that. And if we have bypassed Hong Kong, how can we have the arbitrations, legal centers to serve the need that required by the Belt and Road initiatives? And we talk about the infrastructures, things like that. Maybe I will just stop here. I will share the case in a bit.
So this is a major observation. Despite the talk, and despite the recognition of Hong Kong's being an international financial hub, but in fact, most of the Belt and Road projects and money have bypassed Hong Kong. Nothing to do with us.
Right.
Right. So that is an observation.
So quoting from what Professor Lee's your presentation has said, there's a sort of a discordance, between the vision and the practices, right? Yeah. Right. So I think we'll hear more about this later during this discussion. And maybe I will turn to Linda, who has frontline experience on the recipient country. So maybe we'll hear I invite her to share her views on her experience on that first.
Sure, thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me to join the panel. I'm an assistant professor of development studies at the Department of Public and International Affairs, College of Professor Linda Lee. So as a scholar of development studies, I see a huge emerging literature, development literature, about state capitalism and the rebirth of national industrial policy. So lots of the developing countries are actually looking at how they can develop various industry in order to diversify their economy and also to take off. And seeing this kind of demand, foreign aid, foreign capital, foreign joint ventures feeds their development trajectory, including China. So including Chinese capital and Chinese enterprise going into these various developing countries. However, if you really go into these developing countries and talk to them, you will notice that they have different concerns from countries to countries and also within countries. So when we went to Sri Lanka in 2019, before the COVID outbreak, we talked to various stakeholders, the state agency, business elites, and also frontline workers, practitioners. So they have different concerns, and they also prioritize different concerns. So out of all the interviews that we have conducted, I realized that many of them consider equity, environment, and also enhancing localization as their major priority. But then they have different kind of concern. They have different, they put different weighting on all these concerns. So some might care a lot about environment. Some might care a lot about living standards. So for example, when we talk to people who are involved in the port development in Sri Lanka, while the Chinese side were very anxious, I mean, they are not anxious, they are very excited to bring in their successful model of port development, of port city kind of metropolitan development to the cities to enhance their development. Yet some of the people there actually do not want to go that fast. They might want to enjoy seaside, relaxing lifestyle. They do not want to be pushed to that extreme. So they have a different kind of concern. They also care a lot about environment. They also care about, for example, the feasibility studies on environmental concern before we actually launch the port development. But then other side might think that development first is more important. So I think I would leave all those hard science research about feasibility to our financial specialists. But no matter what, when we decided to go into these countries, and when these countries want to engage foreign capital, we really need to know about local concern, local needs, local demand, because my experience with research in Sri Lanka and also my own research in Kazakhstan, I feel that you might have people might have a very good negotiation deal between state and state, government and government, or government and business elite. But most likely they forget about the majority public. and not knowing that these public views actually at some point of time in these developing countries especially will shape their entire engagement performance or engagement outcome. So if you don't care about the local people, it's very difficult to have all these projects completed. And we have a very interesting story about frontline Chinese enterprises. They actually learned after like 10 years time in Sri Lanka, they started to know that they need to reach out to the local public. One of our informants said that they would actually reach out to a neighboring schools asking, do you need help from our people? We can go and help you like paint the wall of your building wall, in order to show a friendly Chinese engagement. And so I think this is a bottom-up, frontline, self-initiative, corporate social responsibility kind of behavior. But what we need might be more centralized, organized, government-led approach to gain soft power in order to make our hard projects successful. I think that's what I would like to share.
Well, thank you, Linda. So maybe we should turn to Nicholas for him to share his experience on how Hong Kong can play a unique role in the Belt and Road Initiative as far as project management experience is concerned, right? Nicholas, please.
Thank you. Thank you again for having me. And I do apologize I can't be there today. So we have been engaged in Belt and Road projects for about 7 years now. So we've been involved in Belt and Road related promotional work with the government for about 10 years. So we have been active in ASEAN and also Central Asia and South Asia and Central Europe as well. So our experience tells us, now looking back to the past 10 years, there has been over $1 trillion of USD invested in 3,000 projects in 200 countries. Now that is a huge number if you compare to what the World Bank have invested in the past 30 years, which is about $47 billion. So $1 trillion in 10 years versus 50 billion in 30 years. So going forward in the next 10 years, let's say Belt and Road 2.0, we all know it has to be high quality driven. We all know it has to be ESG driven. It has to be bankable, feasible, and also linked with the common prosperity and common destiny of the humanity concept as well. But more importantly is now we're shifting gears going towards the next 10 years. We're into the harvest. We're into the operational stage of Belt and Road. So in the past 10 years, we have seen many and involved in many huge projects, 50 billion, 100 billion, or at least 10 to 20 billion projects on infrastructure, like high-speed rail or cross states rail or, highway networks, ports, so on and so forth, or large industrial parks. But now all those infrastructure are built, all those connectivities are built in all these Belt and Road countries. The question comes in now is, we have to bring in the industry, we have to bring in the employment, we have to bring in the high quality driven operational know-how to bring about that kind of economic connectivity, economic prosperity to all those SMEs and people. As mentioned by other panelists, it's at the end of the day, it's about the people. You can have huge investments, boost GDP, but the people have to benefit. And Belt and Road Initiative, when it's first set up, the World Bank already sort of estimated that it can pull at least 7 million people along these Belt and Road countries out of extreme abject poverty. So that would be, I believe, the goal of the Belt and Road Initiative going forward. And how does Hong Kong Professional come in? As other speakers has also mentioned, Hong Kong is the hub, and we have to continue to play the role of the hub, where capital and Belt and Road projects will come to Hong Kong, set up SPVs, and sort of use Hong Kong professionals in legal, accounting, arbitration, fundraising, finance, so on and so forth. And HKMA is also studying along with Exchange to see how we can list Belt and Road projects pre-revenue down the line as well. And along the Belt and Road Initiative, we all know there are a lot of natural resources. For example, nickel mining, for example, coal mining. How can we do ESG or green mining and then have it list on Chapter 18 in Hong Kong Stock Exchange as well, which allow pre-revenue listing as well. So I think, you know, innovation and SPACs obviously have Chapter 18A, 18B, 18C coming. So these are all sort of pathways to get funding. But to get to that, you need to be bankable and feasible. And that is Hong Kong professionals. We know how to risk manage. We know how to structure risk. We know how to design a project with, you know, high quality service to reduce those risks. We know how to bring in different partners together to, you know, diversify our risk appetite, so on and so forth. So that sort of marketplace for Belt and Road projects, I believe the government will promote more going forward. And I think in the past 10 years, when we look at some of the more successful projects along the Belt and Road, they're usually projects that has partnered with a Hong Kong entity, whether it is professional service consultants or whether it is a financing institution in Hong Kong. So that model of state-owned enterprise or SASEC or MOFCOM, you know, partnering with a Hong Kong platform and going out to Belt and Road countries, that I think is a all-win situation going forward because of the high quality professional services, the international expertise, the international background of the Hong Kong professional services team, and the international standards that we have been practicing for years will be proven to be a very valuable asset. So, you know, as Professor has mentioned just now, we're not just a super connector, but we're a value connector. And because we are also a value connector, we value add to the project. We're not only just a participant, but we're also a beneficiary. We should be a beneficiary of the Belt and Road Initiative. So we just don't connect. We connect with value add. And I think going forward, these sort of projects will play to our strength, Hong Kong's strength in a way, because I don't think in the next 10 years, we will see $50 billion project, you know, for one single project or 100 billion for one single project. I think, you know, based on this harvest, high quality driven phase that we're going to see in the next 10 years, it will be smaller, agile projects that is highly bankable, highly feasible, and with, you know, strong economic sort of sense to ride on the projects, to ride on the successful infrastructure built, you know, in the past 10 years. So, for example, I think, you know, small, you know, renewable power plants or small waste management plants or data centers or, you know, digital infrastructure, telcos, small companies or small projects like these will be very popular in the Belt and Road industry initiative countries, and Hong Kong can play a very strong role because if it's mega scale, it's very difficult for Hong Kong professionals or Hong Kong sort of investors or listing companies to look at because it's very daunting. And so at the end of the day, it would be only state-owned that would take up a $50 to $100 billion project. But if it's, you know, $1 to $5 billion projects, then that would open up the market tremendously, you know, with Hong Kong participation, Hong Kong partnership, and Hong Kong investment and involvement. So we're seeing the next phase to be sort of a golden opportunity for PPP, public-private partnerships, not just state-owned companies or Belt and Road countries' sovereign funds, but also private and also listed companies in Hong Kong or around the world or in the local country to participate, because it's not a zero-sum game. It's not a project where you have, you know, certain economies or countries invested and other countries can't participate. I do believe in the next 10 years, it will be very fluid. It will be business driven. It will be project bankability driven with a lot of private sector participation in different economies, and not just Hong Kong or China, but in the local countries or European countries if they're interested, because it has always been an inclusive platform. It's not a one or, you know, either me or you, you know, either one sort of kind of development. And I think another speaker has mentioned about the people-to-people bond. I think that is extremely crucial as well. People-to-people bond, it's one of the 4 pillars of Belt and Road initiatives. And after we've built the physical infrastructure, the digital infrastructure, the economic connectivity, then it comes, we have to strengthen the people-to-people connectivity, that bond, whether it's education, whether it's culture, whether it's innovation, or sort of, we often tease that in a grand scale of things, if the countries constantly travel, if you have inter-economy or inter-country or cross-border marriages and families being born that way, then the bond runs a lot deeper between different economies when you do business going forward. So I think people-to-people bond would be a main focus through education and culture in the future as well. I think it'll be interesting to look at Sri Lanka as a case study, and I know it's mentioned in the book as well. I don't know if many of the audience here know, there are 2 very successful port projects in Sri Lanka. One is actually, cash flow positive and running quite well. The other, which is in Colombo, encounters some challenges. And you see the Western media, you see the global media painting a very vivid and horrible picture of what had happened in Sri Lanka based on, Chinese capital, so to speak, as a debt trap. But in reality, when you look at the numbers, and it's all public knowledge, it's on the website of Sri Lankan government, Chinese capital account for 7% of the national debt of Sri Lanka, right? So more than 70% comes from World Bank, Japan, Europe, and US, but no one talks about that. And if you talk about bankrupting a country, it's not because of the 7% debt. It's definitely not. It's because of the 70% debt, which is not owned by Asian or Chinese or Hong Kong sort of creditors. So I think Hong Kong getting involved can also become a more sort of softer facilitator, and also a more international facilitator to mitigate these kind of potential narrative in along the Belt and Road and in these projects. I think the initiative has set out from day one to be highly inclusive, to be highly sustainable and long-term. It's not a zero-sum game. I was in Singapore recently for another talk, and we discussed it's not about Singapore, Hong Kong, it's about both. We see a lot of capital coming from all over the world into Asia right now because of global geopolitical and economic climate. And this capital can easily anchor in Singapore and Hong Kong, and we can work closely together because Singapore can do something we can never do. And vice versa, we have something and we can do a lot of things that Singapore can't do as well. So it's about working together to access new market opportunities, to access quality projects, and to increase prosperity of the local people as well. So I think Hong Kong professional in the future will need to see how we can better add value in that regard. And it's not just one way, it's 2 ways, because a lot of Belt and Road countries, they have strong interest to get into the GBA, and GBA and mainland China companies, they have strong interest to go to Belt and Road as well. So I see Hong Kong being sort of the perfect overlap spot between Belt and Road initiative and GBA internationalization. So it's a dual global circulation. Money go both ways. And we're also the overlapping point of RCEP and also CEPA. So RCEP is the largest trading deal, free trade deals in history. That is the only and most ambitious trade deals that would target non-tariff trade barriers, which is services, and also digital trade and economy. So RCEP will probably in full force in the next 10 to 30 years. And CEPA is already the most, the freest free trade agreement within China. So parking money in Hong Kong, it's because of the 4 overlaps, Belt and Road and Greater Bay overlap, RCEP and CEPA overlap, that would form the sort of hub for that dual circulation and sort of talent pool. So that's sort of my 2 cents. Thank you.
Thanks, Nicholas. Well, very confident, all right, forward-looking, our assessment. Of course, some subdued observations on the past as well. Well, by the way, our chapter on Sri Lanka does talk about the successful development in Colombo port, and also we also mentioned the fallacy of the debt trap argument as well. So yes, true. In lots of international media, especially those stories in the newspapers, they don't talk about this. But I think increasingly a small number, a very small number of academic work, they actually address, they acknowledge, the facts. So hopefully, I think the discussion about Sri Lanka will be more fair in due course. Well, I think that now we have heard our panelists speak, and then may I try to, before we open the floor to the audience, may I throw a question to our panelists first? Because all of you, in different ways, right, in different aspects, would see the potential of Hong Kong, right? Would see potential of Hong Kong in financial aspect, in legal, and of course in communication, I suppose, right? And also well, Nick also just talk about Hong Kong has a very bright future and as international hub of services. Well, Hong Kong has always been such a hub, right? But it seems that, so what is the bottleneck? What is the bottleneck that might still need us to work on, right? Before, all these potentials can be more fully leveraged. So may I knock on your, brain, and can you share? Yeah, well, all of us, yeah, anyone, yeah. Maybe Jerry, you start with? Yeah.
Let me, I think Nick covered a lot, and actually, for example, he talked about how we can utilize Hong Kong's financial center to finance some of those incoming business flows, whether it's a Belt and Road Initiative related or not. I think that's a great point. What I want to share is a case from my research, which I think that can help tie in a lot of these things. The case is China merchants investment in Djibouti port. Djibouti is a small country located in northeastern Africa. It has a population of less than 1 million, but it's facing the Red Sea, and its port assets is very valuable, and it's a scarce asset. It serves the Indian Ocean to North Atlantic shipping route through the Red Sea. It also serves the heartland of Africa, for example, Ethiopia. The country has been termed as one of the 8 debt-trapped countries by Chinese debt. And also, it's like a typical example of Chinese neo-colonialism, a scapegoat or the mistreated target. That's the brief or the kind of perceptions we probably have picked up from the media. The case is like this. In 2006, Djibouti teamed up with DP World to build a container terminal port. DP World took 1/3 of the equity joint venture and leaving the 2/3 to the Djibouti government. Instead of spending their own money with DPW's sponsorship, the joint venture went out to raise a project finance deal in the amount of $263 million. The arranger was Standard Chartered Bank, Middle Eastern branch. The deal went well with 7 or 8 banks participating in the syndicate. And the joint venture also purchased the insurance from the World Bank insurance arm to provide provide another layer of protection to the lenders. And the terminal was operated by DP World, but actually it was sourced to a third party anyway. The business was doing quite well, generated a lot of cash flows. The port paid on time all the installment loan payments and the interest. In the meantime, it paid management fees to the third party manager and also paid dividends to the two JV partners. It was doing quite well. In 2017, probably the 10th year of the deal, the port paid all the interest and the principals. It was a great deal. It was voted as one of the Middle Eastern project finance deal of the year sometime during those period. Then in 2013, China merchants teamed up with the Djibouti government to build another terminal. It's called a multi-purpose terminal, handling both containers and cargoes. It's a finance, how it finance was like this. The Chinese Exim Bank, the policy bank, loaned $400 million to the Djibouti government. Then that money was then further lent by the Djibouti Ministry of Finance to the project. So one transaction was split into two legs. And it was doing well because the port was financed and managed, or the port was managed and operated by China merchants. Both China merchants and DPW, we all know, are world-leading port operators, two of the top 5. And the port went into operation in 2017. It has been doing well. Then we all know what happened in 2020. As a result of the pandemic, in mid-2020, Chinese government announced to exempt the principal repayment and the interest payment of the intergovernment debt owned by 77 Belt and Road countries. Djibouti is one of those 77 countries. So without much public information, so I assume that the $400 million loan were among the loans exempted by the Chinese government. So that's the current situation. We all have heard like Chinese government is involved in the kind of negotiations with those countries to restructure debt. Now let's do some analysis. When DPW and the Djibouti government went out to reach the first project finance deal, Djibouti had a GDP of $769 million. And in 2013, 7 years later, it was $1.325 billion. So the country was much larger in terms of the GDP in size. Then the first loan was repaid on time, was all fine. The second one right now is in a kind of an unknown situation. Let's see if Hong Kong was involved. The loan was arranged through Hong Kong by whether it's Exim Bank or Standard Chartered or whoever, and the bulk of the money could be contributed by the policy banks. It will be governed by Hong Kong law, and the contract will be entered here. Everything will be done just like a Hong Kong deal. What would happen? If it was a project finance deal, probably the interest payment and the principal repayment should be safe because the sources of the payment would come from the cash flows of the terminal, and the terminal has been doing well, and it has been managed by China merchants. If that part didn't work well, if you also buy the insurance from a World Bank insurance arm, the insurance will kick in to assume that obligation. Then if that didn't well too, well, lenders, we know, like we buy a house, if we don't pay up the mortgage, the banks will take possession. Now you can go in and assume you can do that in a kind of international situation. You take possession of the port assets. That port asset is very scarce and valuable. There are tons of buyers waiting to get hold of that asset. So the asset is your collateral, is your safety. In any event, you have legal recourse here available, for example, in Hong Kong, and go after the assets or even go after the guarantors or the insurers. You have recourse. But right now, there's nothing of that.
Very powerful, your story, okay? That tells, you know, the potential contribution of Hong Kong.
Hong Kong.
Yes.
Can I just add one more
Yes.
point? And if, as a result of the $400 million Chinese debt to the Djiboutian government, in 2017, IMF warned Djibouti government that you have got too much debt because your foreign debt to GDP level reached 85%. That's one of the reasons that one of the research papers you also cited in the book, that they believed the country was debt trapped. I did some calculation. If the loan was a project finance deal secured by the port asset, and it's not going through the government, it's just a commercial deal, then Djibouti's GDP, foreign debt to GDP level in 2016 would be 65%. It's very likely not to be treated as a debt-trapped country, or there would be no Chinese neocolonialism in that particular case. So the political rhetoric doesn't have supporting to that. So in a nutshell, I would say that the commercial deals or market allocation of Belt and Road capital, for example, through Hong Kong in capital market fashion, probably on the one hand can provide a viable financing alternative for the project. It also creates a benefit in Hong Kong and to create Hong Kong as a Belt and Road financial center, not financing. I would distinguish between financing and financial. Financial is a full service. So financing is only paying money for something. Okay, I will stop there. Thank you.
Yeah, very important, and actually the crude message is we have all the facilities, okay, and systems, you know, ready to deal with modern business. And not to say those very complex infrastructure projects, right? So please use us, okay? If you don't use these sophisticated and well-developed and well-used systems and facilities, and use, this is G2G, right? You know, some projects might need G2G, but not most of them, right? And so it would not help the governments in plural. And so that is the potential role of Hong Kong, right?
So with that, yeah, maybe Linda, what about?
Yeah, I can just have a quick response, because to answer Linda's questions about what is the bottleneck. We all know that we have potential, but then why it's not happening? So the bottleneck, I think, in my views, is that Belt and Road Initiative has always been framed as a huge state centralized project, or let's say a kind of umbrella concept where it is very centralized, it is very organized, it's from the Chinese government. But actually, it's not. It's actually a lot of the time, many of the projects are arising from local initiative, and it is only later captured by Chinese government or central government as a signature project. But originally, many of them are business-driven, market-driven. It's arising from local need to address some of the local development issues, like the one that I have been researching on China-Europe freight trains. Is actually initiated by Chongqing government in order to address its local provincial government development problem, so that they initiate this kind of transnational freight trains. And thinking that this is a centralized project will then give a lot of Hong Kong practitioners a perception that this is not something that we can help. It's too big and too grand to participate. And therefore they have this kind of hesitation. And some of these countries are also a little bit more high risk, so they don't want to step out of their comfort zone. But I would think that from our on-the-ground research, there are really a lot of opportunities, and a lot of the projects are, as I mentioned, initiated by local initiative, so they need help. Just one quick example, recently because of COVID outbreak, freight trains moving goods from China to Kazakhstan, for example, and vice versa, has actually been blocked because of the zero COVID policy, because of the healthy concern, quarantine concern. So they are blocked. And some of the goods were somehow idle there, and they were, some of the perishable goods are actually get rotten there. And then the logistics practitioners and freight forwarders, they will have to compensate for the damage of the goods. So as Jerry mentioned, if we have insurance, they would be fine, right? They can be covered and protected by insurance. But it's not so well governed. So my informants told me that what they have to be, how they solve the problem is that they will have to get a deal with the good owners that in future, for 5 years, they will have 10% discount for whatever they transport with this particular freight forwarder or logistic practitioner. So in other words, they will have to solve the problem themselves in an informal way. So they don't have this kind of institutional professional services with them. So I see the gap. The thing is how to reach out and to communicate and to really tap into Hong Kong's professional services.
Thank you, Linda. So yeah, maybe it's time to open up the discussion to the floor. Maybe if anyone in the audience would like to have a question for any of our panelists, it is the right time.
And comments are of course welcome. Yes, Walter. Do we have mic?
Thank you very much for what looks like a great book. I haven't read it yet, so apologies. My question is a bit on the focus of today was on sustainability. Yeah? And I get the point that on arbitration, on finance, I think Hong Kong has such a well-established role in the world where you can definitely be of service for these projects. On the sustainability, I heard Mr. Ho mention that the project should be ESG driven. I'm not sure what he means with that. What I know is that in Hong Kong, there's a big surge, a big demand for talents on ESG. There's too little of it. At least the industry is complaining about it. So my question is, what is actually your advice with regard to Hong Kong bringing in kind of environmental, human rights, labor rights, the kind of standards that you consider when you're talking about ESG into these projects? The second question relates a bit to it. Hong Kong is organizing once a year a conference, quite a big one on this topic. Now, as an EU, we have offered a couple of times to bring in EU perspective. We don't do bells and road, but we do have connectivity, we have Global Gateway, which is sort of the European equivalent to this. But so far, we haven't actually been able to contribute to these conferences. Now, I've been to Hong Kong for 2 years. I mean this really nicely. I think Hong Kong has its strength in sort of being the international, most international place of China with regard to standards, etc. So one role that Hong Kong could play more, I would say, is bringing in this international perspective in the Chinese agenda. So I'm not sure if you are able to sort of give your wisdom on these two questions. Thanks.
Well, we try to. You mean the annual conference? Do you mean the Hong Kong Belt and Road Summit?
September, October, or something like that, which I've attended it twice. And it seems to be very much a kind of a confirmation of the Belt and Road Initiative. And it's fine. I mean, we are here a guest, so we are not here to sort of too much promote our agenda. On the other hand, I would see Hong Kong's role in conferences like this to actually bring in the international perspective, because that's the strength, that's the talent, that's what you have in Hong Kong. And if you want to play that role in the future, then it actually might benefit to keep that openness with regard to standards coming from outside China, still fully respecting that you're part of China. So it's more a strategic choice. On the first one, I'm just wondering on the sustainability dimension, because of course a lot of, I mean, apart from the debt servicing and the point you made, I think it's also about the sustainability and the environmental sustainability of big projects like these, which is the same when you talk about other donors or other countries. But what is your particular vision or outcome in terms of the studies, what Hong Kong can contribute to that agenda?
Right. Well, I try, you know, to respond to the first, and maybe I will, and then I also would like to invite my colleague. Is Dong Liang here? Oh, okay, he's here. Well, I start first, and then you can supplement. Okay, you know Dong Liang. Okay, we met before. Well, I think on green standards, ESG standards, what does Hong Kong's aspire role, right? I think that's your question. Well, of course, we can never represent Hong Kong, but we can represent, you know, ourselves as academic, and we are, you know, aspire, okay, to think for Hong Kong. As a matter of fact, you know, our team, okay, we have a team, okay, put it this way, we have some colleagues, okay, working on the green vision for Hong Kong, okay, and then we also contributing, or maybe we are learning, okay, we are learning and trying to contribute to the ongoing discussion on this global standards, which I think will be forthcoming in June, right? The IFRS global standards, and then Hong Kong Exchange has recently released its latest consultation paper, which would hopefully march one major step forward for Hong Kong's ESG's reporting. So I think I can only speak for myself, put it this way, okay? I myself, certainly I would like Hong Kong to, well, remain an open city, as you said, okay, embrace the rest of the world and bring in the best of ideas and insights to the city and to China, to mainland China. And because that is actually the traditional role of Hong Kong, right? Before we talk about beyond superconductor, we need to play well the role of superconductor as well, right? Before we know beyond that, right? So that is actually the role of superconductor, right? And foster, encourage, or even continue. Actually, Hong Kong has been doing pretty well before for a long time, all right? That role. And so I hope that trend will continue, all right? And then we certainly, our domestic standards, well, I mean, Hong Kong standards, I dare not, okay, recommend mainland China standards. But for Hong Kong standards, certainly there is still a long way to go for us to improve on our own labor rights, right? And all kinds of ESG standards, certainly. That's why Hong Kong Exchange is working on that. So we aspire on that. But our project would be forthcoming. Maybe on that point, Dong Liang, you want to supplement a bit?
Okay, so thanks Linda and Liang from the same department as Prof. Linda. So I think my question will be the part of the answer to Mr. Walter. I think actually my question will be how Hong Kong can keep its leading role as a financial hub in the new era of carbon neutrality. I think the carbon neutrality actually raises many new emerging services Hong Kong can do. For example, how we can make the taxonomy on the carbon neutral technologies, and how we can propose and develop the insurance services for the overseas business on the carbon neutral technology, for example, exports to other countries and regions, and how we can improve the climate-related the reporting in the ESG reporting to motivate the financial sector to make more investment and loan to the business on the carbon neutral field. Will be Hong Kong can play a very vital role in the near future. But now, if we look into the arena of the European Union, Japan, and Singapore, it looks like they actually go ahead of Hong Kong. So how we can strengthen this kind of service in Hong Kong, I think will be very vital to reshape Hong Kong's future vision on the new track of the competition in the financial hub in the carbon neutral area. So that's actually my question, and also maybe some answer to Mr. Waters. Yeah, thank you so much.
I think the second aspect I addressed already. Yeah. Thank you. Go ahead. Jerry would like to add something.
Yeah, we talked about all the policies, papers, how industries have talked about in financing, green bonds, things like that. But actually, I'm not sure Nick still available when he talked about how Hong Kong firms can help out, for example, in project management, designing, all of those things. You know, Hong Kong has maintained a very high standard. Let's just use one example. MTR manages 2,600 miles of rails outside Hong Kong, but in Hong Kong, it manages 263 kilometers only, 10 times outside Hong Kong than in Hong Kong. And MTR will be able to export its high standard of whether it's ESG, environment, technology, whatever, to other markets. If MTR can actively participate in managing those rails built by Chinese big infrastructure project elsewhere, I think automatically those kind of technologies, standards will be exported and maintained. On the port front, I can say one of those, I believe, Professor Li, that's this one, I think that,
Colombo, this is Colombo.
right? That's the Colombo Colombo South Container Terminal, operated by China Merchants. China Merchants Port is a Hong Kong company listed here in Hong Kong, stock code 144. Nobody talked about that one. Everybody focused on Hambantota, the so-called top debt trap port of the project. Actually, it's the same. Right now, it's operated by the same company. This company was actually a typical international open bidding kind of BOT project. It was won by China Merchants in 2011, very early, and it has been doing quite well in a number of ways. Environment, China Merchants Port exported the latest technologies in terms of green, the import energy saving motors. But Sri Lanka couldn't supply the kind of electricity with a stable, all those technologies. So it had to run on-site diesel engines to power those big cranes. And working with the Sri Lanka Power Authority, China Merchants gradually replaced all those diesel engines with a stable power supply. That saved, avoided a lot of those pollutions. I got the numbers, check out in my book. I forgot the numbers. And it was a leading the kind of environmental push in Sri Lanka's port operations. Socially, that port employs over 1,000 employees, but only 17 Chinese expats. The rest were all Sri Lanka local employees. They hire college graduates, they train them locally in school, bring them to China, and have the apprenticeship program, train these people, issue certificate, they return to Sri Lanka, operating as engineers, all sorts of things. Later on, of course, when they got the better offers in Dubai, elsewhere, they could make twice the money they could make back in Sri Lanka. Socially, they were still doing well. Again, I have some information in my book. Hong Kong firms really export high standard ESG to the project where they could operate. Yes, we play that role, Hong Kong.
Shall we field another question? Thank you. Yes. Okay.
Well, everything is fine. We've been promoting Hong Kong as a professional service hub for Belt and Road, but so far, how far have we gone through? Just use Jerry's example. You just talk about Djibouti. A friend of mine was he's stationed in Djibouti nearby. He couldn't open a bank account in Hong Kong. As simple as that. He was doing trading, large volume trading. He owns part of the land that's now operating by China Merchant as well. But he couldn't open a bank account. So the next project that he's now currently working with my friend on infrastructure for Djibouti, they're moving to Singapore because they don't want to go through the hassles of try to explain to Hong Kong bankers who they are and why they're in Africa. So as simple as that, we have CPU here. So I think that's something that's worth people to, and are we ready? Our professional services, including banking, finance, and others, are they knowledgeable about the Belt and Road? Not just the ASEAN countries, Africa, the how do we call that? The Central Asia countries. Okay, very, very few Hong Kong service providers are actually knowledgeable, and if we pretend we are, it's not going to get very far. So I think, yes, we are professional. We have been very good. We are the only common law regime. I can memorize this. You heard about this on every single day. But is common law applicable to Central Asian countries? Maybe somewhere in Africa, yes, but somewhere no. What are we doing there? Are we? We shouldn't be patronizing. We shouldn't be saying, okay, we are part of the modern service industry because we are, in line with the Western practices, and therefore we are the leader. Yes, that is an advantage. But at the same time, I think maybe we as Hong Kong need to be a little bit humble and learn and work with those countries in Belt and Road, and then considering we have talent, we are able to then help. Because I have heard so many, well, not so many, I've heard a handful of cases of our friends in mainland companies, and at the end of the day, they're not getting much help from Hong Kong service providers, but instead they're getting it from London, they're getting it from Singapore. So maybe it's something, it's always nice sitting in CityU and talk about this, but out there, maybe the reality, we need to do a check. Thanks.
Well, thanks, women. Actually, this is my question about bottlenecks, right? So we have often talked, and we sometimes heard a lot also, right, about our great potentials. And certainly we do have great potentials, but what are the bottlenecks? Some bottlenecks, it's within us, okay, that is within the various sectors, services, provider, whatever, right? Or within the education sector, or some bottleneck maybe within the government or within the recipient countries, right? So that very, very important for us to identify the bottlenecks. And in fact, you know, maybe I should say a little bit more about our book. The book talks about bottlenecks. In fact, the starting point of the research of the project is to ask that question that, well, Hong Kong was asked, okay, was expected to do a lot of things for the Belt and Road Initiative, but apparently people here doesn't know what to do about it. And so we asked a very simple question: why is that? Why is that? Why is this apparently a gap between expectation or not knowing what to do, right? And when questions were being asked by people from Hong Kong to the speakers who are encouraging people of Hong Kong to work more, then the speakers don't know how to respond to those questions, all right? So these are our initial observations, and we ask the question and try to find the answer. The answer that we find, actually, multiple directions. We find bottlenecks certainly within ourselves, all right? So within our financial sector, within our legal sector, within our whatever sector, okay, a lot of limitations. So women, you are absolutely right, okay? I applaud you, okay? And at the same time, there is bottleneck from the authorities. That is the official authorities who want us to do more. Because, for instance, our discussions about the vision, right? The vision, the lack of clarity about what exactly is the objective, or what is the program, etc. Those originated from the source, right? Those are originated from the source. Because the Belt and Road Initiative is not promoted in Hong Kong, right? It does not start here, right? So it starts somewhere else, and that the source has not been able to give very clear-cut answers, and so that sometimes adds to the confusion. And of course, sometimes the listeners, okay, the audience, right? Sometimes we hear one thing, we have different perceptions, right? Sometimes that's always the case, right? So sometimes bottleneck can come from the receiver end, right? Because receivers, we all have our preconceptions that might lead us to emphasize here or emphasize there. So we identify multiple sources of bottlenecks, and we talk a little bit, we try to cover them in the book. So please, okay, and then read the book, and then send us your comments and observations. And of course, we only touch the tip of iceberg, certainly. Yeah.
Thank you, Professor Lee. Maybe we should try to see if there's more questions from the audience.
Testing. Good afternoon. I was one of the contributors to the dispute resolution chapter of the book, and recently I'm the senior research head of Yazhou Zhouhong. And one of the questions that when we drafted this chapter is that we have encountered is the issue of slum arbitrations. And a number of interviewees told us that they were worrying about this phenomena. But due to the lack of time, and then we could not cover this issue very in depth. So, lately, I've heard that last year we have seen a case that the Hong Kong High Court has set aside some arbitrations. But while the Singapore Court is relatively reluctant in setting aside such arbitration. So may I ask if the latest development of this issue, and whether could we conclude that or consider that the local courts are more flexible in setting aside this kind of some arbitrations? Thank you.
Is that a question for Professor
It's the
Chen?
for legal center.
Well, I don't think we can conclude just based on that one incident, right? We have to look at probably when other cases come to Hong Kong. There's always a lot of debate, you know, whether Singapore courts are more pro-arbitration than Hong Kong. I just don't believe in that. The former Chief Justice, Geoffrey Ma, is a big proponent of arbitration. So I think we need to wait and see, you know, when other cases come to our court and to see if there is a trend of this happening. And a lot of it can be distinguished on a case-by-case basis. So I would adopt a wait and see approach. But having just said that, I just want to respond earlier about bottleneck. I think Hong Kong lawyers are very adaptable. And we learn very fast. You know, 20 years ago, you talk to any local Hong Kong lawyer, and you say, oh, can you conduct proceedings in Mandarin, just Mandarin? They will freak out. But now, you know, a lot of my friends who just came back from the UK, they spent their whole life in the UK, now they're senior counsel in Hong Kong, they speak perfect Mandarin. So, you know, also, I really do echo what Whitman has gone now, but I think Whitman is absolutely correct, right? We need policies that support us to go into the Belt and Road Initiative. But Hong Kong lawyers, trust me when I say this, we learn very quickly.
How about Hong Kong lawyers trained in common law, also working in jurisdictions not using common law? How does it?
I think more and more people are qualified, dual qualified. A lot of Hong Kongers, they are taking the bar exam, not just limited to the Greater Bay Area lawyer exam, but also getting qualified in the PRC exam. I think you're getting more and more people who are dual qualified going forward. You know, also echoing Whitman's point earlier, pity he's left already, it would be a nice dialogue. You know, we just can't say, you know, oh, because we're common law, we're above you. This is one of the things I always tell my students, right? Don't feel that common law is superior. There's no basis for thinking that way, right? It's important for us to learn, and there are many areas of the law where I think the civil law solution is actually better than the common law solution. To keep an open mind and to get dual qualified, maybe, as you said, Linda.
But is it the trend really happening? You know, I know now, you know, you can sit for exam, all right, and then practice mainland law, but not too many people are doing that, right?
Very few, but it's still a sort of a pilot program, right? So it will take a bit of time for it to work. So I think going forward, more and more people will go there. The local industry, I think the local legal sector, we have a lot of people, you know, and you know, just looking at the domestic market, it's not enough to support the number of professionals we have in Hong Kong. So, you know, going out of Hong Kong is definitely the trend. Yeah.
Any more questions from the audience? Yes, James?
Thank you. I just want to follow up on the bottleneck question. If there are one or two things that could be done now in terms of either incentive or other concrete actions that could be done among all the stakeholders involved, government, the private sector, and some other groups, would panel members be able to come up with one or two such specific things that really, you know, could be done realistically in the short term?
Good. I would invite the panelists to speak from your sector, right? So for instance, Jerry, in the financial sector, what is the one thing to be done? And the legal sector, and then from the community side or recipient country communication, and Nick, okay, from the project management side, all right? One thing. So Jerry first.
Okay, one thing. I hope that our SAR government can work or convince the policymakers in Beijing to distinguish between what is a commercial project, what is a government aid project, and have all the commercial projects done in Hong Kong. Financing, legal, arbitration, everything. If you finance the deal from Beijing to Africa, bypassing Hong Kong, that arbitration will difficult to be brought back to Hong Kong. If the financing is done here, the financing center role will come in. The service capabilities will kick in to help ensure the deal is done properly, to the best we can.
Peter.
Not so much as a legal measure in itself, but I think, as Jerry mentioned, a lot of the capital, BRI capital doesn't go through Hong Kong. I think that's a major issue. For law, in the financial deal, we're more of a supporting role, right? So we need the capital to come through Hong Kong before we can advise. So I think the major policy is for CSHK government to convince the central government that we need a bigger share of the pie.
So Peter and Jerry concur, same thing, okay? Yeah.
Yeah, I think if we are looking at the community side of the recipient countries, probably we can, I basically would think that there is something has already been done in terms of Chinese enterprises have already reached out and trying to do some corporate social responsibility things there in order to be friendly. I think these kind of community services could also be a strength of Hong Kong that we can actually help. Like we can export or we can reach out to demonstrate what we have been doing in Hong Kong in terms of corporate social responsibility things, in terms of community, and also things like capacity building, because they really care a lot about localization, technology transfer, spillover effect, something like that.
That's the human rights part, okay, the transparency part, the governance part.
So finally,
Yes.
maybe to Nick, what are the one or two things that could be done to fully realize our potential in the Belt and Road Initiative?
I think to answer the question on bottleneck, I think for architectural project management or engineering, the bottleneck is we don't have enough people in Hong Kong. That's just a fact. And there's way more than enough projects in Hong Kong currently and coming. So I think some of the panelists or some of the questions asked before was the actual bottleneck is we don't have enough people. And with Northern Metropolis, with Chi Hou reclamation, we just don't have enough people in the industry. So people will just prefer to work here and not go anywhere else. I mean, that's just a simple fact. But government through other bureaus are trying to resolve that issue. So we'll wait and see, and hopefully that issue get resolved soon. On the government side, I think the bottleneck is right now we all heard all the good things about Hong Kong being a hub, but we need a few very vivid, strong success case that people can see. We need something that, or the Belt and Road Office can maybe act as this, is the facilitation office to facilitate specific projects to make sure that they go through successfully and create that hub effect for Hong Kong. Because if people see there are a few truly successful Belt and Road Hong Kong-based projects being successfully delivered or fundraised with sustainability or ESG or high quality driven approach adopted, then more people will come, including capital projects, professionals will come to Hong Kong because they know where the money is. For these projects along the Belt and Road, at the end of the day, it's all about the money. But the money has to be bankable, smart, and responsible. And that is what Hong Kong is trying to do. So I think the bottleneck right now is there isn't a very obvious success that is greatly publicized. So we haven't been able to sort of kick off that hub machine yet. But just a quickly answer, I think Walter's question earlier about sustainability. I think Hong Kong, in terms of green standards, has been very successful. Green bond, green finance has been very successful regionally. Obviously, Europe, US, and other economies in the world have their own standards. Since I'm not in government, I think my 2 cents is the Belt and Road Initiative has invested $1 trillion in the past, and going forward, we'll work with our partners all over the world to invest more into these Belt and Road countries. We will continuously to upgrade our standards, and Hong Kong standards is obviously quite international, but Hong Kong will probably take up the role of the sort of universal adapter of standards. The sort of interoperability role would be based in Hong Kong, including carbon credit standards, Europe and China. How can we make that work? Hong Kong will probably be that interoperability role through the finance and also legal framework that we have. But at the same time, it has been quite clear that Hong Kong, with China in the Belt and Road Initiative, since we are such a significant investor and a partner in this global infrastructure initiative, it does make sense for us to create our own standards. It does make sense for us to lead our own standards, and in terms of standards and pricing, to be able to lead in that regard. But we're open to work with European standards. We're open to work with international standards as an interoperability basis. But it's not either or. And in these Belt and Road Initiative countries, they have their own standards. They have their own carbon neutrality roadmap. They have their own issues. And we cannot use the same ruler that works in Europe to use it in these developing nations, or the same ruler that works elsewhere in the world to work in this part of the world as well. I think there's needs to be a basis of mutual respect. And I think just on the sustainability side, I think it's also useful to understand it's the developed nations in the world with these standards currently are the biggest contributor to the carbon emissions in the world in the past 40 to 50 years. But these developing nations in these Belt and Road countries, they have not contributed nearly enough carbon emissions in history. But of course, Earth is the Earth. We are bounded by this common destiny, as illustrated by our president of China. So we will try to help nations to get there by investing in them and by helping them and by partnering together. But I think the issue of standards is not a clear-cut issue because it's not one size fits all. Yeah, thank you.
Well, may I also answer this question? Well, I fully agree to the suggestion by Jerry, which also by Peter. Okay, so I think if the central government, at the recommendation of the Hong Kong SAR government, all right, and make Hong Kong the base for which more projects would be contracted here, and then the financing would be arranged through the Hong Kong financial market, of course, under the full regulation, okay, the full code of conduct here, then I think that would be a great step forward for the quality and the assurance of Belt and Road Initiative projects. And for Hong Kong, it is actually business as usual. Of course, we need to step up and we'll be more busy. But I think that would be a very important step. And on that, in fact, may I refer colleagues and audience to chapter 3 of our book, okay? Supposedly, Professor Phyllis Mo would talk about this if she is here, but she's not. Because in that chapter, we are talking about the financing, and we have a small, very initial proposal, okay? Very rough. should be put in the dustbin, okay? But I think as an idea, the idea is Hong Kong should think out of the box and to create on top of our current financial market instruments, we should develop a platform for the Belt and Road projects, but with the full financial regulations, but with some adaptations because of the different backgrounds of the Belt and Road countries, and so on and so forth. So we have some discussions there. I think I fully agree with what Nicholas proposed, that we need some examples of success, right? Because otherwise we always do the talk without walking the walk, right? Without doing so much talking, right? We need to have some real deeds. So I think that the platform, the financial market platform, is one direction. The second one, maybe already happening, is the International Mediation Court, right? So that is something new, and mediation certainly is important, as important, if not more important, than arbitration, right? Because it's more flexible. So this is happening, right? And this is based in Hong Kong. So if Hong Kong can help this idea to work and will work well, right? So initially, maybe not for everybody, maybe not everybody sign up yet, right? But if we make it work, then people will come to use it. So that could be one possibility, that we start to build up successful examples, right?
Thank you, Professor Lee. So I think that's also an excellent way to conclude the seminar. And I think thank you very much for the panel members and also the audience for your very valuable comments and suggestions. And I think on behalf of CPU, I think these would all be very important inputs to our work later on as well. Yeah.
So on behalf of our team and City University of Hong Kong, I thank all of you coming here, our guests, okay, and also of course William and his team for supporting this project and research and this seminar.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Nick. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
May I invite all of you here? We should take a picture together. So can we have some? Yes, you have to go. Oh, maybe 1 minute? We can take a picture. Hi, Alfred. I thought you were gone. This is Alfred, my head of department. He's my boss.